Kirsten is an active board member of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. She was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and her parents are also Spiritists. And she was a member of the Spiritist Society of Philadelphia before she moved here to Maryland in 2011. She has participated in Spiritist Medical Congress and multiple Spiritist symposiums. Professionally, she has a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing and works in the federal government as a health insurance specialist. Please join us in welcoming Kirsten DeMelo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, don't believe everything you hear, except that nice ringtone. So today we have ventured through fear to reach faith and then hope. So we've gone through all the emotions. So I'm without fear, Sylvie, and I have hope for this talk that you all will take something away from it. But first and foremost, thank you so much to the Spiritist Societies of Maryland for the invitation, for the honor, and for the immense responsibility, and for the anxiety. Thank you. Agape love is the love we will talk about today. You may be familiar with other types of love. Romantic love. What other kinds are there? Romantic love. Yeah. Oh, yes. Filial, fraternal. Yes. Well, agape love is that selfless, ever-giving, sacrificial love. And what is that most closest to that we can think about on this planet Earth? Well, the closest thing that probably most of us that is most tangible for us is the motherly love. The love of a mother is so strong. And even so, as Chico Xavier would say, that the prayer of a mother could break the chains of any, I don't want to say hell, but could break the chains of hell, metaphorically speaking. It's so powerful. And we use this as a backbone of imagery for today. And I'm going to share with you two cases, one which will involve motherly love, and the other close to agape love. We do want to warn you that the case we will be sharing is a little bit graphic, a little bit, but don't worry, not that bad. If Manuel Filomena de Miranda can write psychographically through the hands of Divaldo Franco and print it in English and Portuguese, then I think it's sufficient for us to talk about here today. And not just sufficient, but imperative. And so today, we wanted to share a story. And normally when we hear stories, there is this thing that our brain does, and it automatically tries to reference something in our lives. So if we're hearing a story about a man that loses a dog, that loses its cat the next day, who gets into a car accident, we're automatically thinking, oh, I have a sister that has a cat who went through that, or I have a this or that. Our brain is always looking out. It's a habit, if you will. But today, we are invited to not look out. Today, we are invited to go within. Today, when you hear about that cat or that dog, turn your look inward. It's important when we hear stories, when we're reading literature, when we're studying, that we have this lens of looking inward. And unless we create that habit, it may be difficult at first, but not impossible. In this book that I mentioned, Facets and Patterns of Spirit Obsessions, a fantastic book. If you don't already have it, it's in English. You can get it on leal.com or on amazon.com. But they tell a variety of different stories about cases about people who lived in the early 1900s in southern part of Brazil who suffered from pulmonary tuberculosis. So there's a spirit mentor called Dr. Lustosa who walks around this particular sanatorium, which was a nice name to give a sort of a hospital at that time. It was a tuberculosis sanatorium where people would go and stay and often go there to discarnate. So in this particular sanatorium located in the south part of Brazil at that time, it was a physical, actual hospital that existed in the early 1900s. This spirit doctor, Dr. Lustosa, along with Manuel Firmino Miranda, other workers, were observing some really interesting cases. And there's one case that stood out to them, and we wanted to share with you this particular case. And it takes place in chapter 4 of this book. And the chapter is entitled Necessary and Urgent Rescue. And it's so moving. So the scene is of 3 people. One of the incarnate in the hospital bed, the other 2 in the spirit realm. And the scene that really drove Manuel Firmino Miranda was just this scene, not only the disturbing spirit and this sick man who in the late stages of pulmonary tuberculosis, if you're not familiar, at this point, he's coughing up loads of blood. So you can imagine the horrific scene, a man that's near death already in the hospital. And alongside that horrible scene, you see this spirit also disturbing him. But what really drew his attention is something I'll mention in a minute. But here Manuel describes him as this, and he's called just the sick man. He's a former slave master who delighted in making justice with his own hands, having personally drowned in the waters of the old Paraíba River several of those who lived under his oppression. And now here he is, atoning for his crimes through this illness, experiencing in these torments, in these tormenting circumstances, the direct persecution of some discarnate enemies that were not able to forgive him even after 180 years, which is astounding. But what draws attention, both in the book and just in the story, is what Manuel Firmino Miranda, what he's most touched by, is this female spirit. And Dr. Lustosa, already hearing the thoughts of Manuel Firmino Miranda, questioning who is this woman who's trying to assist this obsessor and this man in the physical realm. He says, she is the mother of the unfortunate persecutor. Both had been sold to this man who, in a fit of wrath, separated them on the first day for no reason other than the simple pleasure of tormenting them. The mother, in her way, with this separation from her son, which was not uncommon to do at that time and across the globe during that time, she accepted and she resigned herself with the separation. They took her son, who was not yet even an adult, and she left. She was sold to somebody else. She took it and she was resigned. Her son did not have the same reaction. He was revolted against it and could not accept that. And so here you have today this triangle, this 3-part dramatic series, or 3-person dramatic series, where you have the mother of the slave, former slave, and the former master, and the mother forgiving her old persecutor. You have to imagine the scene, and you have to imagine what she went through, because although I'm not going to go into it, in the book, the spirit author details what the mother witnessed, how this particular slave owner whipped to death her son, And then he picked him up off the whipping post when he had his, a couple breaths left in him, and brought him to the water, in the Paraiba water, to drown him. She witnessed all of this. He brought her back to his farm so she could watch him kill her son, because he derived joy from that. It brought him joy. They say it in the book. So here we have a man today suffering and near death. And there's this cycle of hate and love, which the book references, and we all know as spiritists, will likely continue on in further reincarnations of reparation and healing, forgiveness, all the things we're going to be touching on today. But we wanted to bring this, to keep this at the front of our mind, to know that we always have this option. We can be like the mother who chose to forgive and accept right away, or we can stay with our anger, which is often when we talk about what is the root of our anger, what is the root of our hatred. Well, remember when I said that at the beginning, when we talk about anything, when we're reading anything uplifting or hearing a talk, our tendency is to think about, oh, who would this talk be good for? Or, oh, I'm going to send this talk to my uncle or my sister or my brother or my cousin or whoever. Let us look inward. And this is really, really important, because when we are talking about the travesties that the human mind can concoct and perform, it can be egregious, to say the least. And that's not to say that those who commit those crimes against the laws of God won't have to, in so many ways, pay for what they've done. It does not diminish what they've done. However, we say this because it's important for us to evaluate our own sentiments, our own feelings around what happens to us. Pride and selfishness, which I'm sure a lot of you have already read and learned about in the Gospel according to Spiritism, it's a moral plague on earth. And it also, the Gospel says, it is what keeps us furthest from God. So if you want to be as far away from God as possible, then keep your pride, keep the selfishness. But it should be a prayer that we utter every day. God, help me not to be so prideful. Help me to see what my blind spots. Help me to be more selfless, knowing that this is a scourge in our humanity. Having said that, by the way, because we are very well versed in the works of Joanna de Angelis through the hands of the medium, the late and blessed medium Divaldo Franco, we should always have compassion for ourselves, for the shortcomings we identify within ourselves and others, which also plays into all of this in love, utilizing love to overcome hatred, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And forgiveness is a key in this process of us utilizing love in action, which is charity. Love in action together, forgiveness is a huge part of that. Oftentimes if you've ever listened to any court proceedings, YouTube and the internet nowadays, you can pretty much find anything. So there have been, I've heard many different court proceedings where, in the case of a criminal case, where the living family member is allowed to give a testimony of different things. And there's one particular case where this young man had been brutally murdered, and he had a large amount of family that came into the courtroom. They were giving their testimony, and they were just spewing hate to this, to the murderer, just spewing and saying all these things. And understandably, they're angry, they're upset, they're processing their grief and their emotions, and it's all understandable. But at the end, the last person to give their testimony was the father. And he got up to the microphone and he said, I know I'm supposed, talking directly to the individual who killed his son, I know I'm supposed to hate you. I know that in every fiber of my being that that is what everyone thinks I should do. That is what everyone has expressed here, that they wish the same death upon you that you've done to our son. But I can't do that because I follow Jesus Christ. And he has taught me that forgiveness is imperative on this road of life. So I forgive you. I forgive you, for you know not what you've done. And I pray for you. And with that, our understanding of the power of forgiveness is born. Because ultimately, forgiving, as the gospel shares with us, it's a fundamental step in our spiritual progress. Forgiveness is not for the one who has committed an error against us. Forgiveness is for me. It is for you. It is to free yourself from all of that. And when we talk about love and love in action being charity, we can't help but also talk about forgiveness. But one of the things they bring us in the Spirit's book is this great acronym, and I know in Portuguese they use this a lot. I don't feel like it makes a lot of, it doesn't, fall off the tongue as easily in English, BIF, at least not to me, unless you're a Back to the Future fan. And if you know that reference, God bless you. But BIF, benevolence, indulgence, forgiveness. These are imperative on our journey, on our infinite journey as immortal souls. Because today we may not wrong someone, but tomorrow we may inadvertently, or maybe a loved one of ours, hurt someone, and you would want them to forgive your child, your son, your spouse, whomever it is. Because what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it? It is this. It is benevolence. It is indulgence. It is forgiveness. It is that mother who witnessed her son whipped to death, close to death, and then the slave owner calling to one of his workers to bring the salt water, to pour it over the wounds to wake him up because he had fainted, and whip him again. And then watch the slave owner pick him up, drown him in the river. And you can do nothing. You couldn't even scream, because you know what they would do? They would cut out the tongues of the mothers who screamed and said angry words. So she just stood there. And yet she forgave. Forgiveness is that ideal. Forgiveness is that embodiment that a sister who we don't know her name in this book was able to transcend time and space and even have compassion for the one who has wronged her, not just her, but her son. And if anyone here is a mother, you know that instinct, that mama bear, can come out. It's strong. So for her to transcend that is something of epic proportions. Similar to this story of Ava Kaur, some of you might have heard of her, or maybe you have not. You actually can find her full documentary on her life on pbslearningmedia.org. It's a free video. It's a documentary. Extremely moving. It's about an hour long. So let me tell you about this story. Ava Moses Kaur, she was a twin. Her and her twin sister Miriam were in Auschwitz. They were little girls, probably about the same age as my two sons, 7 and 4, not 7 and 4, 7 or maybe 4, because they were twins. And they were subjected to horrific experiments by the Nazi doctors, which was common at that time, especially as they wanted to do research on twins. But in 1995, as part of a series of this documentary that was done, and also to find healing, she did something magnanimous, something no one expected. She made this extraordinary decision. She met with one of the Auschwitz doctors, Dr. Hans Munch, although he was acquitted of his war crimes, but she spoke with him. She got his testimony. And she even got a signed document about the gas chambers, because believe it or not, I guess there were people who thought that these things never happened to these people. But in that moment, publicly in front of many, many viewing or people, she publicly forgave him, but sincerely forgave him. And that shift changed everything. Her act of forgiveness was not an endorsement of the Nazis' actions. Instead, it was an act of profound self-liberation. And she said, I decided to forgive the Nazis, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved to be free. I no longer wanted to be a victim of Auschwitz. I no longer wanted to be a victim of hatred. I wanted to be free. So she freed herself. And she spent the rest of her life trying to set free everybody else. And she wrote this book, did a lot of speaking tours, but her main goal, her motto was, and you can see it here on the screen, I want my time on this earth to count for something. Despite what has happened to me, despite the horror, I forgave, and I wanted to count for something. So till her dying day, she lived out preaching forgiveness, no matter what has been done to you. And she's quite an example of such a case as to the extreme what can be done. Because not only did she suffer, she had to watch her twin sister, who she was very connected to, be abused and not be able to say a word. And anyone who studied the psychology of children and how the growth in the brain works, these were children. So you can imagine how this would have affected her. So for her to transcend all of her pain and to transform it and find her way to forgiveness, once she reached that, she realized that it was this golden key to life, this miraculous secret that no one had ever told her. She didn't realize the transformative power it had until it happened to her, until she decided to forgive. And her love for her own self, her love for her deceased family and sister, her love for her people, for life, overcame the hatred. And we know that there's so much research nowadays has been done on compassion, on empathy, and we know what it shows us. All this to say, and you can Google this, that regular compassion practice has been linked to increased positive emotions, reduced stress, improved immune function, better social connections. It literally rewires the brain for love. Anytime we're practicing things that are helpful to others, practicing this compassion, this selflessness, this agape love, this brings us closer to plenitude. And ultimately, charity in action is what we're called to. And Joanna, in this book, A Full Life, says, charity is a light that benefits the person in need and broadens the understanding of the one who spreads it. Forgiving offenses, regardless of their nature, constitutes moral charity. And she reminds us, and we love this. So work on your feelings. Work on your feelings and find joy. The famous writer, Mary Curie? Oh, I'm forgetting her name. She did a famous Netflix series on tidying up. I think she wrote a book. Thank you. What is it? Marie Kondo. And one of the things that she taught is, if you have a lot of stuff and you pick it up and you ask, does this bring me joy? So we have to ask ourselves in our lives, is this bringing me joy? How can I make joy? But first, we must get to know ourselves. And lastly, just some practical steps, if you haven't already gathered some from today's talk. Indulgence. What does that mean? doesn't mean giving permission to others to do us harm. It just means we're more understanding of other shortcomings. Self-examination. We have to be and work towards being more self-aware. It's said over and over again, but there's no two ways about it. Facing our shadows, Jung said, is imperative if we don't want to be led by our shadows. And benevolence. In the Spirit's book, it says, do all the good that is within your power to do. That says a lot. It's not just do all the good in your power. In the Spirit's book, I'm going to repeat. In the Spirit's book, it says, do all the good that is within your power, within your reach to do. And it is our responsibility to seek out the good that we can do and to ultimately bringing us to this finality that life does not end, as we know, with the death of the body, and that the hatreds or the love that we carry on for as long as we wish it to be. And in the case of this sick man and his spirit obsessor and the subsequent mother, 200 years, that former slave still was a slave. 200 years, still stuck in hatred, still following around wherever this slave owner went, wherever he found him. So let us be free. Let us allow love to come into our hearts and give love a chance. Thank you all so much.